Welcome to the Howie Assessment Tool, a tool to assess the likelihood of success or failure of the strategy or business plan within the coming 12 months. The Howie Assessment is a tool that's built and developed by us here at Howie, and we have more than 10,000 teams executing on the Howie platform that's building up the dataset for us to understand what truly makes or breaks a strategy, and what is the difference between winning and losing, and how you can quickly assess this in a 45-minute session together with the CEO. This tool is validated both from external research from MIT and Gartner and through hundreds of already done assessments in Europe. Let's back it up a little bit. Why are we using this tool? Well, the business problem is pretty clear. Strategy execution is broken. 80% of strategies fail in execution. We know well by now why this happens. It's three major factors. First is the ability to narrow down your prioritizations to the critical few. Secondly, it's the failure to lead and steer on the measures driving results and outcomes, not only on the outcomes themselves. And the final part is the failure to create accountability and follow up on progress to ensure the change actually happens. These three primary failures are the reasons for the three pillars in the Howie way of working. Why you need to focus on the most important goals, why you should accelerate the key activities that are driving your growth, and how you can create a culture of commitment. Moving on now to assessment. This tool is a great way to put you in the right discussions with the CEO and the profit and loss owners that you're trying to do business with. So rather than focusing on feature selling, you're placing yourself in the main aorta on what truly matters to the CEO, and it's a highly impactful way of getting to what really matters, quickly. So what is it? The outcome is a report broken down into 6 different perspectives, and you get a final success score which indicates your likelihood of succeeding with your business plan and a high-impact action plan to get going. The primary client from the assessment is the score itself, the likelihood of you succeeding. This is super interesting for the CEOs themselves, and it's also helping the CEOs to gain insights of his or her real challenges around execution, cutting through the politics of their own company. It is also a great tool for you in your client conversations to open up a sometimes pretty closed CEO to discussion because it's very relevant and it's very down to business, fast, and accurate. It's also the first point of getting the CEO to start making his or her strategy actionable. You get a detailed report per area of strength and developmental areas of strategic initiatives and the financial potential in the strategy. For us here at Howie, and for you as potential partner, you get into the right discussions with the CEO. It really gets you closer to doing business, and you don't end up feature creeping in your sales process towards looking at the product in itself or getting bogged down with the politics of the management team. It's also a great hook between meetings and keeps the process moving in the direction of where you need it to actually do business together. It's a great way of keeping the sales process going and delivering high value meanwhile. And it's also something that helps us correctly scope the first delivery to figure out what's the best possible starting point given the situation at the client currently. It's also something you can give away for free, and it's perceived really high value. We've done a couple of hundred of these by now, and we found out some pretty interesting stuff in terms of how it looks on average, so we thought we'd share some of this with you. The model in itself is a self-estimation. You either strongly disagree, you disagree or agree, or you strongly agree on roughly 30 questions. One of the questions is, I have a clearly defined strategy. When we average it out on all of the hundreds that we've done already, the average answer is 84%. And you should interpret this as most CEOs either answer I agree or strongly agree around that I have a clearly defined strategy. Another question is that we agree on the priorities and the strategy. Here we have an external benchmark, and it's one of the slides that you saw previously. It's a study from MIT where we know that the actual agreement within the average management team is not 72, but 51. And here is a really interesting point where you see some type of glory effect where the CEOs tend to overestimate how clearly they have defined their strategy or how much they agree on their priorities in the strategy. This insight is interesting to us and is a good tool to drive our conversations forward and getting the potential client to understand the true nature of his or her clarity and gaining insights on where to improve. Another question. I'm satisfied with how my management team are driving our prioritized areas within their respective functions. It's moving further and further down, and all teams have defined what activities they need to do in order to reach their goals, the input they need. So all of this, as you can see, is what's stopping you. Different inefficiencies in the execution journey. we know that only 20% of change strategic initiatives actually are successful. All of the areas above are fixable and would improve execution and are part of what we typically fix by introducing Howie. I want to bring you on a journey on what are typical strategies. How does it look if you average it out? On average, CEOs really agree that they have a clearly defined strategy. Well, how clear is it and what is it? If you start with the what question, we can see that on average, over a 36 months period, they want to increase their turnover by only, you could argue, 13%. And this number has changed greatly the last 2 years to almost triple their profit levels. So, at least from the assessments that we've done to date, focus is on profits rather than turnover. If you then move over to how clearly is it defined, you have 3 types of CEOs. You either have the type of CEO where you have really clear initiatives with, I know in how long and from where and who's responsible for it. Or you have the ones that are more areas of growth and a learning organization. And then you have the CEOs where you do not have a plan at all, where the strategy is a budget wish list. This is interesting in how clearly defined is really your strategy. On average, from the new number that they want to get out, from the 13% improved turnover growth, they've only identified on average less than 40% of this money, where the improvement is actually coming from. So they're quite vague, to be honest, but this was the turnover. This was not the focus for the CEOs, it was profit. But here it is even worse. So a question could be asked, how clear is your strategy if you have only identified an average of 32% of pinpointing the initiatives that will get you to your financial improvement? So this is one of the discussions you can end up having with your CEOs as a consequence of doing the assessment. You get an understanding of that if you leave it here, and you leave it for the organization to figure out the rest. That's really the inefficiencies that you will get in the organization towards having a really clear culture of commitment. Because it's impossible to understand what am I supposed to be committed on because we don't have clarity up front. If you like the tool assessments and you want to learn more, we have a whole training video where we go through the model in detail and how you can implement it in your sales conversations. Good luck!